And one.
Welcome to Ninon Speaks. Ninon Speaks is an internet TV show that we've been going on for now 3 years. Ninon Speaks Media Image is giving a platform for a lot of people out there that we would like to hear what they have to say, what they do. They're fascinating. They're all very, very different. And today we really do have somebody very, very different. And I've been reading a little bit about him, not a whole lot, because I really don't do that. I like the show to be spontaneous, and I think this is the first time I've seen him. And Bruce Davis, he has a PhD. He's written several books, fascinating man. But before we go any further, Ninon Speaks Media Image is on every week, every Wednesday. We give people a platform so that we can get them out there to find out what they're doing, how they're doing it, and where they're doing it. We have people from all over the world, which is fascinating. So you could be anywhere. And everybody was saying to me, if I ever move out of Vegas, I live in Vegas, they said, well, you won't be able to do your show. I said, well, it's all on the internet. And they said, well, where do we plug in? I said, the internet. So this is fascinating. It's an internet show. You can anywhere you want. Bruce Davis happens to be, I believe, in San Francisco. He is an author. He's written The Heart of Healing, Monastery Without Walls, which I think is fascinating, Daily Life in the Silence. I love this title of this book, My Little Flowers. I think that's beautiful. And Simple Peace, people don't realize what Simple Peace is, just simple. The Inner Life of St. Francis, The Calling of Joy, which is fascinating. His latest book is The Love Letters. And this is a fascinating book. I personally haven't read it yet, but I know a little bit about it because I've been reading about Bruce Davis. So before I go any further, let's introduce Bruce. He's got a lovely smile and a beautiful background. Hey, Bruce, how are you?
I'm fine. It's good to meet you. This is fun. I'm glad we're doing this.
I know, isn't it fun? Have you ever done a television interview like this before?
Never, never. I've always been in the studio, and this is totally new, and it's great.
Isn't it fascinating? I never thought we could actually do this, and I've been doing this for 3 years, but I can't do it without, Steve Toth, who's he is actually my producer, and he lives in Denver. And then we have our coordinator, Nan. She lives in New York, so we're covering all the states. And we can do this all through internet. So I think this is quite fascinating for you, knowing that you can get your books and yourself out there to many more people.
Well, that's what's incredible about the internet these days. The old days it was books would sit in a bookstore and hopefully people would find them. And now with the internet, we can talk to each other heart to heart, mind to mind, and the community is incredible.
And that's exactly what we're going to do now. And couldn't find out where you were born. Where were you born, Bruce? Where did you come from?
I come from Denver, Colorado.
Oh, really? Oh, that's where our company is. Yes, Conscious Evolution Media. That's where their offices are. And they're having had a lot of problems there this year, right?
I don't know. Right now we live in the hills north of San Francisco. We live in the Bay Area. And so,
you live in the Bay Area. How do you like San Francisco? You like it?
We love the Bay Area because it's very open-hearted and there's lots of exciting things happening. The internet is changing the world and it's changing San Francisco almost daily. It's another world out here.
I mean, you and I are both sort of, in the older generation, and we're sort of, we've got ourselves into the computer world because I think it's not that we wanted to. I think we had to if we want to be in the communications or we want to communicate with people. How do you think it is going? Is it advancing? What is it doing? Do you like it?
I think what we're doing and the idea of having an international world community is incredible. I think the negative side is that people are becoming hooked in. We're too dependent upon it. Our kids and their friends are always texting, and parents are always watching their kids through their smartphones and stuff. And I think we lose a sense of solitude and independence and a sense of wholeness. And I think that's not so good. That's the negative part of it.
That is the negative part of it, but that also is what you are doing. You are kind of getting people involved with each other in a very forgetting the money, forgetting a lot of stuff, and just very peaceful way.
Yeah, because as a psychologist, I found that people really need peace and quiet. Yeah, I'm trained as a psychologist, and I discover that people really need peace and quiet because the
Yes.
rat race and being always connected to internet and emails, it creates a nervousness and anxiousness. So for like 20, 30 years
Yes.
now, we've been offering retreats where people step out of the rat race and just experience some days of peace and quiet and silence. And we found that's really healthy. It's really good for people.
When you first started this, were there as many people involved in it than there are now, or do you have more people now wanting that peace?
No, I think the rat race was always there. And it just was different. Even before cell phones and internet, people wanted to step outside of just being busy all the time and find a few days of more simplicity, peace and quiet, a few days to nurture their hearts. And so the demand was always there, but now I think it's more intense just because the pace of life is so fast with the internet and smartphones and all the gadgets that we have.
Why do we created ourselves because we are absolutely totally in control, well, supposedly totally in control of our body, because when you really look at it, that's all we have. I mean, the things we have around us are just material things, or things we think we need. And truthfully, we really don't need that many things, and we really don't need to. Why do we make our lives so complicated? What is the trigger in there that makes it sort of, we've got to do this, we've got to have this, we've got to run, we've got to ride, why? What triggers this?
I think there's a feeling that people have that they can never have enough. And so they keep trying to fill up. You know, how much money is enough money? How many possessions
So
is
they fill
enough
up with,
possessions? And so we keep trying to fill
yeah.
something up instead of coming back to our hearts and making friends and with our own simplicity of our own hearts. You know, it's difficult for us to receive just to enjoy the day. And so we stay busy thinking, well, I need to do this and I should be doing that. And it's mostly out of habit that we stay busy. And so it's really learning another pattern of living. More simplicity, more enjoying, more in receiving our family instead of telling them what to do, more just enjoying life. And for the last 12 years, my wife and I lived in Assisi, Italy, and we really enjoyed Italian culture. Because Italian culture, now they take 3 hours for lunch during the day. All the stores are closed. There's nothing else
Yes.
to do but have a little wine and some pasta, and you enjoy life more. And I think in America and in most modern countries, we don't know how to enjoy life.
And we created that. We always think we should have to do more than we actually do. And it's funny because I've come to a place in my life where I'm trying to get rid of a whole bunch of stuff, and I really look at it. Do I really need to do that? Do I really need to have this? And why am I creating these problems? So I'm trying to get rid of a lot of the stuff that really has nothing to do with my life.
Yeah, well, I wrote a whole book on this subject. And it's called The Calling of Joy. And each day we got to listen to our hearts and make choices for the simple things that bring us joy. Otherwise, we make life complicated, and there's a lot of support for a complicated life. It makes us feel important. You know, I have a meeting today, and I'm planning for a big paper next week, and you know, we all want to. There's this idea that I should be important, and joy doesn't make us important, but it makes us happy. And so, can we
So,
make a decision to be happy today?
well, let's get a little bit into your background. What made you start feeling like this? Because this didn't just happen yesterday. This happened, I think you wrote your first book in when? 1975. So we're going back a few years, going back,
Well, it's a fun story.
30
I
years.
was
And you started writing.
I was a student in psychology in 1975, and I was looking at all my
Yes.
teachers and all the therapists, and they seemed as unhappy and as serious as their patients. They were just a little bit different. And I thought they weren't much of an example, you know, for us students learning psychology.
Yeah.
And so I wrote this book called The Magical Child Within You. It was the first book on the inner child. This idea that not only remembering the pain from our childhood, but also remembering our joy from our childhood, our innocence, our play, our we would naturally forgive and just go on, you know? It was about remembering the inner child. And so that's how I started my professional career with that book. And it really propelled me more and more into this idea of listening to our hearts and learning how to take care of our hearts and following our own joy, because life is short. You know, I'm in my 60s now, and I still feel like I'm 25, but I'm not 25. Life goes very quick. And if we don't follow our joy, before we know it, we've lived a compromised life all these years.
And I agree with that because I look at that as well, and I look at my life. And I'm a little older than you. I'm not. Actually, I am older than you, but I tell everybody I'm 39 and holding.
Exactly.
I've just been holding a long time. That's all. But I feel young at heart. I feel like I've got a lot of energy left. But I'm now deciding to choose where I want to use my energy and what I want to do, and even choosing of who the people I want to be and want to be with, and where are they going to go and do something that I would like to do, or am I just going to, I mean, sometimes you have to please people, you have to be nice, obviously, but then you should choose to be with the people that you both enjoy the same sort of things and can kind of acknowledge each other.
That's exactly what I'm writing about. We have to make choices because life is short. And who do I want to spend my day with? What do I want to do? What's important? After a while, you know, getting more degrees or more success, that doesn't really satisfy as much as being with one really good friend and taking a nice long walk in the park or on the beach and really listening and feeling each other and sharing what life is about, you know. And so these are the kinds of choices we have to look at.
And we don't seem to be looking at them. It seems like we're living a life of quote unquote, you know, I've got to have, you know, the more people on Facebook, I've got to have the biggest amount of Twitter people, and I've got to have this, and it's you're more trying to impress other people rather than living your own life. Now, explain to me, how can people in within themselves? How can they do that, Bruce?
Well, after all these years, we've gotten more and more clear exactly the answer to that question. And we invite people to come to a place that we call Silent Stay. It's a retreat place north of San Francisco near Napa. And they turn off all their cell phones, all their computers, and they have 3 or 4 days of just beautiful nature, silence, and lots of peace and quiet. And at first people are anxious, you know, what am I going to do without my smartphone? What am I going to do if I don't check my email? And I say it's not so much letting go of all that, it's learning how to receive peace and quiet. And the peace and quiet around us helps us find the peace and quiet inside of us. And then we teach them a very simple meditation of going into our hearts, letting go, letting go of all of our busyness, and going deep in our hearts and receiving our own gentleness. There's a big space in our hearts that most of us never find because we're too busy and we're thinking all the time. And we're not just thinking. That's a habit to be thinking all the time. We can learn how to be just present and feel this deep well of peace inside of us. And so we invite people for a few days of silence, beautiful nature, peace and quiet, and then to find this place in our hearts where we don't need to be doing something. We can just be present and just enjoy where we are, who we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think people, when they feel that way, or they feel they're just giving themselves time, do you feel they think, because I'm from England, so I'm in a little bit of a quieter place normally, but I've been living in America, and I know they're always rushed around, and do you think they feel guilty by not doing anything or working, or they feel guilty that other people are going to think they're lazy? Do you think that's kind of got into their minds?
Yeah, well, it's very much in American culture. People work so much here, and we spent a good part of the last 20, 30 years living in Europe. And in Europe, you have much more vacation days. You have piazzas where people take a few hours for coffee. You know, in Italy, you had the siesta, which was several hours in the middle of the day. So in America, we're much more compulsive. But it's a habit, and it's part of our culture, and we can change it. It doesn't make us happier to be working, 50 hours a week. If we have no time for ourselves, no time for our children, no time for our partners, time is precious. Time is sacred, and we really have to ask ourselves, what do I want to do with my time?
So what I'm listening to here is that a lot of people have got to cut their standard of living. They think they've got to have the big house, they've got to have the 3 cars, they've got to have all this stuff that they really don't need. So what the message out there, I'm understanding, is to cut down on all these things and start living, enjoying your life. And you're absolutely right about children. our children are not growing up with their parents in America at all, because they're either both working or they're at school or they're babysitters or whatever they've got, but they're not with their children. And why did they have children in the first place?
Well, what's happening is that people are running on empty, and so they think if they have more and more and more, it will satisfy that feeling. But that's not really true. The problem is that we're so much in our minds that we become separated from our hearts. And that's the emptiness and the loneliness that people suffer from. So they get more and more mental, more and more busy, and more separate from their hearts. So it's all about coming back to our heart, what is important. And literally there's a space in our heart that you feel more whole. You know, you're not lonely, but you're in solitude. It's nice. Nature's around me. I'm with my partner or friends, or I'm just taking a walk. You know, we lose this sense of beautiful wholeness because we're racing around, running on empty, and thinking that as soon as we have some more, everything's going to be better. But it's not really the answer. We need more of ourselves, not more possessions and more money. Which is interesting. Generally, the wealthier people are, that often is the least happy they are. I mean, I've lived in other parts of the world where people have very little, but they're much more peaceful. And that's why this is strange. I mean, in America, we have so much abundance. Our supermarkets are incredible. After living in other parts of the world and then walking back into an American supermarket, the abundance is incredible. But we're not happy with everything we have. And we should be able to have both. We can have wholeness and enjoy our abundance.
So we've got to cut our way of living down a little bit, because you're watching parents working 2 jobs, I mean, just to keep their family going. And I mean, what does that all mean? What is it? Why is it? How is it? It's just, we're just losing track. We seem to be losing track of people.
Well, the first step is not cutting back like working outwardly. The first step is cutting a new path inwardly. And so as we find more of our own wholeness, maybe it's just an hour every couple of days, or you take Saturday off and you go to the beach instead of working all day for the following week. You know, you slowly, as you find more wholeness, you begin making decisions for more simplicity in life. So most people think, well, I need to cut this job or cut this project or not do that. That's not really the answer. The answer is first to find more of ourselves, and then we automatically begin making choices of wanting to be less busy, more simplicity, more peaceful, doing things that really touch me and touch others. And so that's where the new life comes from. It starts inside, and then slowly we change our life outside.
Yes. Now, your new book, Love Letters, we're going to get into the little religious side of what you've kind of put here. And you wrote this book, Love Letters, which was about St. Francis and St. Clare. And you also lived in Italy, where they were at that time. And you talk about the new Pope a lot, and about how St. Francis and St. Clare, how their life was at that time, when it wasn't in abundance, when it was living this life that we've just been talking about, but how they had the tranquility of life, and how religion, I don't know if you want to call it religion, because how life and religion were at that time. And then we have the Vatican now, which is probably the wealthiest place, I believe, quote unquote, in the world, and it's had all its 7 kings and the Popolix and all this stuff that went on, as you and I know, that apparently now these 7 kings are over. And the 7 kings had all the pomps and circumstances and all the lush and red robes and red shoes and big rings. And now with the new Pope, he's kind of got rid of all that, and he's coming back down to sort of reality, to seeing people every day. What made you sort of get into this and sort of start sort of seeing how it all works and what it's all about?
Well, we were living in Assisi, Italy for 12 years. And I don't know if you know Assisi, but it's this really beautiful little town on top of a hill in the middle of Italy. And it's one of the most peaceful places in the world, very simple, has gardens and monasteries through the town. It's just a very peaceful place.
Is that near would that be near San Sorsi?
Yeah. And it's near Perugia. It's right in the middle of Italy.
Oh, I know exactly where it is. Yeah, I know. That's where my husband came from. That's why I know it a little. We were up there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's one of these hilltop towns with this full of the spirit of St. Francis, which is simple joy. And then the
Yes.
Vatican is about 2 hours away in the middle of Rome, and it's the exact opposite. You know, it's
Opposite.
this
Yeah.
big marble palace, and it's all power, all politics, all money. And so after living in Assisi for 12 years, and then comes along this new pope who calls himself Francis, I was trying to imagine what would it be like for Francis to live in the middle of the Vatican with its all power and all politics and all money. And the question is this man really a brother of St. Francis? Is he really a brother? And so that inspired the book. And so I wrote the book in the first few weeks when Pope Francis came along with this question. Francis was living in the Vatican. What would it
Yes.
be like? What would happen? And I had a great time writing the book. And now a year or so later, this man is very special. You're right. He's coming back to earth. He says,
Yeah.
you know, all people are important, not just the rich and powerful. We should not ignore the big percentage of people who are living in poverty. We should not ignore the nature that is coming apart. You know, and he's washing the feet of prisoners, of Muslims, of old people, of
But
sick
he's also,
people.
and he's also of all religions. I mean, he was just in Israel, and he's bringing back this. He said these are people. And these are, yes, we have religions, but they're still people. These are still people that we can include in the Catholic religion.
Exactly, and that's who St. Francis was. St. Francis called the Muslims also his brothers way back then. And that's why Assisi is famous, because all the world's religions would have these meetings in Assisi. And when we were in Assisi, we started a center in Assisi, in the very center of town, with altars to all the religions. And this was before 9/11. And then after 9/11, as Americans, we're really glad we did this, because pilgrims come from all over the world, all religions, and we would sit in the peace of St. Francis of Assisi in the middle of the town. And so this Pope now is that spirit of St. Francis of Assisi, that we all need to sit in peace. I mean, it's very special. I mean, who would have imagined a couple of years ago that these things would be happening?
It's very... No, well, you wouldn't. And you look at all. There's like all the religions live all the way around there. Every single religion, well, not every single, but majority of religions are around. They've got the Muslims, the Palestinians. You've got them all there in one place. And I don't think people sort of always look at Israel as the Jewish state, but then just look a little deeper, go to Jerusalem and check it out and see what it is, what it really is.
Yeah, it's a question of, are the minds that want to have control and be in charge going to rule, or are there going to be a spirit of heart and peace and well-being? And I think it's in all over the world, but it's really centered in Israel. And this Pope, when he showed up with his friends from Buenos Aires, one was a Jewish rabbi, the other one was a Muslim leader, and they showed up, the three of them together, to bring the spirit of peace. It's very powerful, but I don't know how far it will go. We can just hope.
Yeah, and I keep believing this way, and I think if people sort of write books like this, and actually say what it is and how it is, I think is making people more that life isn't so tight, it isn't so definite this way and definite that way, and I'm not going to move. It's be a little bit more open, and I think when you're open within, I think you really have a better smile and a better life.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one man is not going to change the church. He's going to set, yeah, I'm here. One man is not going to change the church. He's going to set an example for all of us. And we all have to practice to be a little bit more like St. Francis. We're all called to this.
I think so. So your idea of writing this book was sort of kind of on the spur of the moment. It was nothing you had planned.
No, it was nothing I was planned. I was just excited about the possibilities of having a pope called Francis. It had never happened before in all the centuries that a pope would take on the simplicity, humility, spirit of St. Francis of Assisi. So we, after just living in Italy for so many years, we were inspired.
So now that he's reaching out to the poorer people that can't give as much money, what's happening, or what are the people that obviously donate a tremendous amount of money to the Vatican, and tremendous amount of money is circulated, and now they're looking at this Pope, which he says he's just the Bishop of Italy, and he is not the world leader of the Catholic Church, and he's made that very definite. He said, I just run Italy. But of course, because he's living in the Vatican, they all have assumed and put it on him that he runs the world as of Catholics. And so what's going to happen to all these people that are donating and give all this money and everything? Do you think they're going to be a little upset, or do you think they're going to like what he's doing? Because he doesn't even kind of live in the Vatican. He lives in a little cottage.
Well, you're right. It's a little of both. And the man he's in a difficult place because he's surrounded by a very conservative bureaucracy, and the leadership of the church historically is very conservative. It's like having a simple St. Francis in the middle of all this. And no one really knows what's going to happen. He's just doing it day by day. But I think it's important for all of us normal people to support him and stand up for it. And hopefully the conservatives will have a more of an open heart and realize that that's what religion is about. And Pope Francis talks about we need an open mind, and we need to look into our hearts. And he keeps saying that all the time, wherever he goes. We need an open mind and look into our hearts. And if we do that, then hopefully, who knows, maybe mountains will move. You never know. Anything's possible.
You know, they say, I think it was in 1870, no, it wasn't 1870, it was 1929, then, with the apocalypse. Do you know much about the apocalypse of the Russians and the Vatican and the Romans, how they had the 7 kings, and now the last king, who was the 7th king that just resigned, he didn't even fulfill his courtship. And it's a funny story because I've listened to it quite often. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know the story, so you tell me.
Oh, I don't know. I'm treading on thin ice here because I'm not gonna skip over it a little bit. Well, there were 7 kings that ran the world, and they actually came in of February the 11th of 1929, and the last king, which is the one that just resigned, was the 7th king, and it actually turned all the way around. That the actual resignation of the time that he left, I'm going to say office, his pulpit, whatever, as being Pope, was actually on the 11th, I think it was on 2013, and exactly the same date. So it's rather a different story, and looking on things of how the Russians and how the Romans were very much attached to this, and it was all of pomps and circumstances, and it was all of, obviously the religion was there, but at the same time it was a lot of money, a lot of wealth, a lot of sitting on the high chair, the red capes, the shoes, as I mentioned before. And this is now, and I'm just wondering why and how. It was all about 7 kings, and this one that resigned was the last king. And then this Pope comes in, and apparently in the reading of all this Pope, he's supposed to be, I'll call it St. Francis, and he's supposed to bring back the religion of the common people, bringing all the people back in together again, and not being about money, but being about people. And so I'm looking at it and thinking, how and why and where did they get this Pope from? You know, because
I don't really know, because the last Pope, Pope appointed many conservative bishops and cardinals, and so how this big body of conservative cardinals chose this new Pope, it's a mystery and it's a miracle, but whatever, it's very good for the world, it's good for the church, it's good for all of us, because there's a big imbalance. The world cannot run on politics, money, and these kinds of things. There's got to be more heart. We've got to look after each other. And the world is so small now, thanks to the internet and everything else, that all the religions have to look to each other as brothers and sisters. And the sisters have to be included. And this Pope still has to do that too. And so, I know it's a big time of change for the world, but hopefully all these religions will become a family of one religion, you know, that we respect each other and appreciate one another.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong in the religions having their own religious ways. I think that's absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't mean to say that you have to have it cut and dry that, oh, well, you're a Catholic, so you can't go to your synagogue. Why not? I mean, you know, why can't we just integrate and still respect, which is what it is, respect each other's religion, because as well, which is, I think, more so, respecting each other
I
of our
agree with you
beliefs.
totally. And I agree with you totally. It's not a question of becoming one religion. It's a question that we don't need to be right all the time. There's beauty and truth in all the religions. And that what the Pope is saying, that instead of being right and judging each other,
Yeah.
just be listening to one another and serving each other and not judging. And that's a whole other way of the church, to not be right and not be judging. In all the religions, we can get so much into that my group is right and all the other groups are wrong. And that's not really what's needed. What's needed is for us to serve one another, be open to each other, and that's a whole different way of living. You know, instead of being important and I'm the best, it's being serving and what can I do to help you to make life better? And that's and that's what religion should be about.
And that's what I'm just so fascinated about you. You lived in Italy and then and so close to the matter, and then after all these years, it's like all of a sudden you've got St. Francis there, and you're like saying, wow, and how did all this happen? And I mean, this must have been very curious for you as to him before it actually all came out. One thing, what you wrote about him when you wrote the book, what you wrote, was a lot of it true to what he really is, that you didn't know?
I rewrote the book because we know the feeling and the spirit of St. Francis of Assisi in St. Clair. We really had no idea who this new Pope was. All we knew was that he took on the name, and in the first few days he was already acting like a real brother of St. Francis. So we just used our imagination and thought, and just wrote this book like, well, if this brother really is a brother of St. Francis, he's going to choose humility over power. He's going to choose service over judgment. He's going to choose serving the poor and receiving the poor. He's not going to be interested in money and politics and all these things. And it's becoming more and more true that there's a new spirit in the church, and hopefully it will spread to all of us. But you're right.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think it's going to spread to the people? Yeah, for you, but I don't know if it was a surprise for you, though, because you already kind of lived it.
Yeah, we were living in Assisi, but to be honest with you, if I wrote a book a year ago about St. Francis of Assisi, nobody could care less. For most people, St. Francis of Assisi is a garden statue with a connection to animals and nature. But now with the new Pope, it's really interesting. Who was St. Francis? And he's much more than a garden statue and much more than a connection to nature. He spent a lot of time in silence. He had a big heart. He had one prayer, Lord, make me an instrument of peace. Now imagine if the whole church had that prayer, Lord, make me an instrument of peace. And that prayer spread to other religions and other churches. I mean, it's incredible, the possibilities.
Yeah, because it doesn't say that those were a certain religion. Those were just words that were meant for anybody.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, we've got a break here. But so now you've done all this. Go ahead.
Well, what's interesting about this prayer about Lord, make me an instrument, it puts us through a personal. Can I go ahead, or should you want to say something? This idea of becoming an instrument.
I'm listening to you. I want to listen to you, not me.
Okay. This idea of being Lord, make me an instrument is a very powerful prayer because it puts you through a process. You know, I want to be an instrument of peace in all my relationships. I want to be an instrument of peace at work. I want to be an instrument of peace with the difficult people in my life. I want to be an instrument of peace with my children. You know, it's a very profound process. It's not just something happens out of the sky. It's an intention. And so that's what St. Francis had. He had this intention of bringing peace and joy, simple joy, simplicity in general. So if the new Pope Francis spreads his prayer and we all like become instruments of peace and joy in our work, with our friends, with our children, I mean, this is very special. I mean, it's no limit to what can happen.
No, then there's no limit, and it's very, very simple. It's very easy and very simple. It's just a matter of going, instead of going into a place angry and sort of somebody just disturb you driving the car or whatever the case is, you walk in now wherever you're going to be or whatever you're doing and have that peace within, then you can bring that peace without.
Exactly, and it's carrying that intention. I mean, most people, we don't really think about what's my intention. You know, we make New Year's resolutions, but that's different than really having a daily intention. And if you have an intention, Lord, make me an instrument of peace. And then when somebody, like, you know, runs you off the road a little bit, instead of honking and yelling at them, you remember your intention and you just, okay, I'm going to drive a little slower and I wish them well. You know, this intention of, Lord, make me an instrument of peace, it can really change our lives.
Absolutely. Now you're married. Your wife is Ruth, and is she in the same place as you? Have you worked this together, and have you kind of formed this together as of two people that were different, that met each other and got married? And is she into the same wavelength as you are and what you do, and she does the same?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've been together for 24 hours a day for more than 20 years. But I think all relationships should be that. We don't know relationships. We're so much like, I like this and I don't like that. We're always so busy with what we like and don't like. But underneath our relationship, you know, relationships are a gift. And we need to receive each other and our partners as a gift. And there's a presence, you know, the presence of my partner, she's very special in my life. In addition, she does everything and I do very little. But that's besides the point. She speaks all the languages. She does the internet. She does the organization. I mean, she's very capable. But in addition to that, there's a presence and there's a big support. And I think that's the foundation of relationship, is receiving the presence of the friendship and the deep connection in our lives. And that allows us to do things that may be difficult for others to do. So we started this silent retreat in Italy. When we moved to Italy, our friends said, you guys are really naive to think you can just drop everything, move to Italy, and make a place for world peace. But we felt called, and we support each other, and we did it. And we were naive. It was much more difficult than we thought it would be. And then moving back to California, again, we support each other, have a complete silence. People think, well, that's a little crazy. But we said, no, it's not crazy. People need a place where they can just feel real peace and quiet. And so we support each other in this, and we enjoy it ourselves.
You know, that's funny you should say that. I was married for 29 years, and I a good husband, because we were together, and we also didn't have to be talking all the time. I supported him in what I kind of did, and he supported me in what I did, and there was no sort of you do more, you do less, I do this. There was so much, I guess, each other what we both had, and I let him keep what he had, he let me keep what I had, because we have this sync together that was, I think, very unusual. But yes, we were together 24 hours a day, and my girlfriends said, Ninon, how can you be with a man 24 hours a day? And I looked at them and I said, I never really thought about it, because to me it was very natural. It was nothing, it was not a problem. It was like, you know, he was there and I was there, and we, like you and your wife, we supported and helped each other. And I think that needs to be a little bit more. We didn't have to be talking all the time. That we had the silent times, we had the beautiful moments. I mean, why can't we get this back into the younger generation? Because they're having an awful time trying to connect these days.
Well, I think the trouble is connecting with each other because they're not connected with themselves. if you're connected with your own heart, then you're not so busy to blame the other person. Say, I'm going to go take a walk, or I'm going to go meditate for a while, or I'm going to make myself a special dinner. You know, we blame it on each other instead of taking responsibility and finding our own wholeness in our hearts. And relationships are really difficult these days, and people break up more than they're coming together because we're separate from ourselves. We're separate from our own hearts. And the other person is really not going to make us happy. We have to find this within ourselves. And if we take responsibility and feel our own sense of peace, then we enjoy sharing it with our partner and our friends. But if we think the other person is going to give it to us, then we're just going to be in struggle and trying to control them. And controlling each other really doesn't work too well.
No, no, you can't control. I've never tried to control anybody, and I'm not going to start now. That's for sure. Not in this age of my life. But and it isn't. It's a matter of understanding them. And I think a lot of the young people are not going into religion. But you don't have to be religious to. You don't have to be religious to understand other people, and you don't have to be religious to get married. You can. It doesn't really matter if you want that religion, fine, but it's not. You don't have to have it, but you do really have to have the contact with yourself within.
Yeah, and I would use the word spiritual. That people, as a psychologist, I think people need to find more than their thoughts, more than their feelings. You have to find your own spiritual nature. This can be found in religion. It can be found in the beauty of life. It can be found in our partner. But there's a deep river in our hearts, what I would call our spiritual being, our river of being. And we need to feel that and experience that. And then we don't struggle so much with ourselves, and we don't struggle so much with our partners. People struggle because they haven't found their own inner peace, their own spirituality. And so that's what's hard in modern culture, is this loss of spirituality.
How do the young people, how do people, anybody actually, find spirituality? How do they understand it? Should they start reading about it to understand it? Because a lot of people don't think they think it's like spirits coming out of wherever, and it's not. It's a within thing, and I think people misunderstand it. Sort of understand it more, and where can they go and what they can do apart from reading your books?
It's all about nurturing our hearts. You know, it's like spending time with a friend and really receiving the friendship. It's all about receiving deeply life. And when you receive life more deeply, whether it's nature, a friend, a partner, a nice meal, the heart gets more nurtured and you feel the presence of life. So it's really exercising the heart more and the mind less. We still have our minds. We can think and do everything that we need to do, but we need to exercise our hearts more. And we do this through compassion, through generosity, patience, simplicity, forgiveness, and love. You know, really feeling the presence of love with our kids, our families. You know, it's exercising our deep heart. And most people, we're so busy and so mental, we're separated from our hearts. So we need to go to a gym school and exercise the heart. We need, yeah.
Oh, so you've given a good example. Go out there, go for a walk, go be by yourself, meditate, do exercise. Set yourself away from the mundane life. To be with someone to clear your mind. In fact, it's better to be not with someone to clear your mind, because then after you clear your mind, then you can actually go and talk to that person reasonably without being angry. Because so many people out there, I've noticed so many people are angry. I mean, you look at them and, hey, how are you? Fine, thank you. And you're like, oh, sorry for asking. Like, and it is like that.
Yeah, there's a pace to life that makes people angry and they're fearful. And all this fear and anger and resentment, you know, when we were out of America for 12 years and we came back, we really noticed that America had changed. There was a lot more fear, a lot more alerts. You know, the pace of life is a lot faster. And there's a sense of just being easy and happy and peaceful and enjoying life. It's more difficult with all the media and always being connected. And so people really have to take an active step and unhooking. You know, I write for the Huffington Post frequently, and there's a big theme about people need to disconnect or unhook. And I think it's true that you have to take that step. We need to unhook every day, at least for some time, or every week, and just feel life itself without all the gadgets and all the machines and everything we have to do.
Because we don't need it. We don't need all that stuff. We don't need it all. And as you said, you were at the Huffington Post. Your articles are in the Huffington Post. What do they come under? And also, where can people find you, and how can people get sort of closer to you to get a little bit more freedom within their bodies?
Well, in the Huffington Post, they can just look me up, Bruce Davis, PhD, and I write usually about silence, and it's either in religion or GPS for the soul. They have a section for that. And so you just look up Bruce Davis, PhD, in the Huffington Post. And we invite people to find us because we enjoy it. And we're on the internet, silentstay.com. Silent, S-I-L-E-N-T, stay, S-T-A-Y.com. And we invite people to be in touch. And I think we need to support each other to change the culture, to change, have more heart and less this mental drivenness, you know. And so we really encourage people to be in touch with us, and we look forward to it.
Yeah, I would think you would. You also taught at the John F. K. University. How was that? Was that exciting for you, or was that something, you know, that must be quite an honor to be there?
Yeah, well, it was many years ago, and I used to offer retreats for them. And it was sort of an alternative, because they were learning about psychology and consciousness. And I said, if we're going to understand awareness and consciousness, we need to do something different besides studying and reading books and writing papers. So I used to offer retreats and invite the students for a weekend of silence and just feel inside their hearts. And they loved it because it was something different, and they realized that consciousness and awareness means becoming consciously aware of our hearts. And when you become consciously aware of our hearts, there's really a presence of peace. And you can't read about it, you can't think about it, you have to actually feel it and spend time in peace. And so fortunately more and more people are interested in that these days. And the world is changing, and we have a Pope that believes in it too.
Yeah, so because I think, you know, people, I think it's very hard for people to understand what silence is. Can you explain a little bit of how can they get silent? How can they get there?
Well, it's important to turn off all the machines and really give yourself some peace and quiet. And silence is really the presence of peace and quiet. So again, it's receiving. Now, some people, they turn off the machines and they're just sitting there with all their thoughts. And I don't want to sit with all my thoughts and my feelings. It's terrible. So I tell them that in order to get from your thoughts to your heart, you want to receive the peace and quiet. And so that's a practice. And the peace and quiet outside helps them to feel this quiet place inside. And so they want to close their eyes and deeply receive the quiet in their heart. And then we find a wholeness that's very special. So silence actually, it washes our awareness. Silence frees us from all the things we're always thinking about. If we receive the silence in our heart, it's very special. And this is in all traditions. You know, it's very old that people take a walk on the beach or sit on a hillside and receive the deep quiet inside. And this is very healing. As a psychologist, I say silence is perfect psychotherapy. It's much better than all the pills people are taking and all the things they're trying to do to change their lives. Give yourself some peace and quiet and receive it as deeply as you can.
Yeah, those are very profound words, what you just said. And I think, as I was asking you before, for someone to get into that silent place, I think that's the hardest thing for them to do because, as you say, they turn everything off. And they've got the wheels are still working, they're still going. So you've got to turn those off too. And I think sometimes, and I had said this before, I think people sometimes feel a little guilty of was in that place by not doing anything, but it's perfectly all right to be silent. And I always say, collect your thoughts, collect back into, if you like to call it, humanity. I mean, because we're all human, we've all got a life to live, and we all have to still live it in a better way, I think is what
Yeah, well, some people can just go away for a day or so and do this, and for other people, it's not so easy. So we invite people to come on and make a retreat, have 2 or 3 days of silence with a few other people. So there's a group of them around. You're not alone in the silence. We're all doing it together, and everybody has a little anxiety when they turn off their email account. I'm not going to look at it for 2 days, but it's okay. You know, it wasn't that long ago there was no email at all, but they may not remember
Sure.
that. But anyway, so when you do it with a small group and you go in silence and you have an intention of enjoying nature and peace and quiet for a few days, you find a wholeness inside that stays with you. Then you can go back to work and go back to family and everything you have to do after the weekend, but that wholeness is still there. And once you find this place in your heart of like a deep inner gentleness or love or peace, then you know it's there. No matter how busy you get, it's always there, and then you just want to connect with it as much as you can. Every few days or every evening, you sit for a while and just enjoy it. So it's learning about this place inside and then practicing it.
Do you know that I was reading something, I think it was yesterday, the day before, and it was called The Little Red Book. It's about, I haven't read the whole thing, but about is that the very wealthy people sometimes are better off because they have this tranquil place where they have to be able to maintain what they're trying to keep in this tranquil place. They can't concentrate, they can't do what they need to do. So sometimes you find a lot of these well-to-do people, they often, well, how did they get wealthy? Because they actually got themselves into this tranquil place and to get to understand of dealing with all the situations they have to deal with. And if they weren't in this tranquil place, they could not deal with this or do it.
Exactly, and now we live about an hour from Google in Silicon Valley and all the internet companies. And what's interesting is that they have a quiet room in these companies, and they're teaching their employees about meditation. Because they found out, and
Really?
it's becoming big, yeah, it's a big thing in Silicon Valley now. There's a big conference on meditation, and they're all talking about it, because they're discovering that, you know, if they become quiet inside, they get closer to their source of creativity. And if they become quieter inside, they find more of their mental abilities are then present. Because if you're always running and busy and fearful and feeling pressure, your creativity, it gets squished. And so it's very interesting at Google and a lot of the big internet companies now they're teaching meditation, they have meditation rooms, and they realize that people need quiet time, and then their creativity and your life energy is more present.
Yeah, because they're also saying in these big companies that these people that are working for you, they're actually not working for you. They've got this new thing out that they're working with you, because the reason you're a CEO, you cannot do everything. So you employ a vice president or whatever you want to call them, but they're actually working with you, not for you, because if you put that with you, it's totally different to working for you, in other words, telling them what to do. If you work together, apparently this is so much easier for all forms of people, and then you keep your employees much longer. They're happy, because if they're happy, you're happy, and if you're both happy, you're both doing the job.
Exactly, and all this comes from the experience of meditation. Because when you go into meditation, you find this
Yes.
big space inside, and you feel this wholeness inside, and then you begin to expect to have this wholeness with the people you're working with and the people you're living with. So instead of trying to control them and telling what to do, you're coming from a different place in your being.
Yes.
And Silicon Valley is discovering this. That cooperation is much better than competition, and that everybody wins is much better than having winning and losers. They're realizing that we all are one organism in a way, and we're all connected. We all have different talents, but we're all doing this together. And so it's very special. It's a whole new consciousness in business. But also for me, it's a consciousness in living, just daily life.
Yeah. So what are your next projects? What have you got on your mind now? You've written a lot of books, and this last book is amazing. Have you ever thought of putting any of your books or doing anything and putting them into film format?
Well, we don't know, but we'd love to put these love letters between Francis and Claire in film and have this love relationship because it's very different than how most people have love relationships. They had a very deep connection in the heart. They weren't always together, but when they were together, they really understood each other. And most of the books about Francis and Claire are written from a mental, intellectual point of view. This book is totally written from the heart. So it'd be very beautiful to have a film of a real love relationship between Francis and Claire so people could see it and experience it. Because we all have these feelings. We just don't know about it. And then the other thing we're into is we really enjoy
Well, we all have,
silent
yeah, we all have
yeah,
the same. There's a film out called Soul. No, there's not a film out yet, but there's a friend of mine wants to make a film called Soulmates, and it's like these two people meet and they realize how they are so much like you met your wife Ruth. You are really soulmates. You've met something that she does this, but you're not in competition with each other, and because you're working together with each other, you've formed something very positive and very, very good. Whereas when you're sort of always sort of working, well, I want you to take the garbage out, or I want you to, it becomes like a challenge every day. It becomes like oh, dear, I've got to do this, and not something beautiful. Which, oh.
Yeah, but this idea of soulmates, we think there's one special person, and that's not really true. We are all soulmates when we come from this place inside of us, this deep connection with ourselves. We feel it in each other. So we have this friendship. We have this with friends. We meet people, and we just really enjoy their company. We have this with our partners. It's coming from a deeper place of wholeness in our hearts. And Francis and Claire found it through meditation and prayer, and lots of people are finding it. And it's not like there's one special person I'm supposed to be with. We could be with all of each other. We're just coming from a deeper place.
No, but that's not. So it's nice to have that one person. St. Francis had one person. You've got your person. I had my person. So we've always got this, although we can share it, we can now share the two of us with other people. So, but I always think it's so nice to have that back, you know, to use the common knowledge. They got your back and they'll take, but when you do it together, it's so and sort of, you know, though you can all be out. It's nice to have that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very beautiful to have a partnership where we're not struggling with each other, but enjoying each other. And that comes from just being more in ourselves and not being interested in struggling, but having enjoy life. Yeah.
Yeah, life is to be enjoyed. So, Bruce, what message would you like to give our audience out there of how they can start enjoying their life and sort of have that silent moment and not feel bad about it and just have that just give themselves that silent moment?
Well, St. Francis of Assisi said life is a love affair. And I think life is a love affair. And we should be falling in love many times each day. You know, we have wild turkeys next to our house today, and we're just having fun watching the wild turkeys. And life is too short, and we all should have a love affair. And St. Francis and St. Clare are examples of that. And in the silence, we find more of our heart. And with our heart, it's easier to have a big love affair. So I wish all of our listeners and watchers to enjoy life and have a love affair. You know,
I love that. I love that. That sounds pretty awesome to me. Now, where can they reach you again? What is your website that they can reach you at, Bruce?
SilentStay.com. We really enjoy hearing from people. SilentStay.com.
Okay, so Bruce, we've been interviewing Bruce Davis. He has a PhD, an amazing man. He's just finished writing that book about St. Francis, which he wrote before St. Francis was really floating around. And now proof in the pudding is exactly what his book is, because the Pope's doing what he actually wrote and what it really is all about, reaching out to everybody, and that's what we should do. I don't think we should have any sort of animosity to anybody or anything. And not only is it you're going to look good, you're going to feel very, very good inside. So once again, thank you, Bruce, for coming on my show. You were absolutely delightful. I learned a lot from you, and I think our audience did. Thank you for my audience and for watching and being with us on Ninon Speaks Media Image. We will see you next week with another guest, another surprise guest. Thank you very much, Bruce. You take care.
Thank you very much.
Loved it. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.